Hola Sombrero Time teachers, Ruth here, and hey, we're going to be talking about Spanish 2, so second level, Unit 7, Week 3, and we're going to be in La Sala. Now I encourage you to go back and look at the Spanish 1 video, as there's a lot of overlap consistently throughout our curriculum with the vocabulary development. The reason why we do that is because some of you are teaching Spanish level 2 to kids who've never taken Spanish before. We do this with our older kids because they can move a lot quicker, specifically in the literacy component. But what I need you to do this week is, for those of you who have limited time, don't have the full 45 minutes 4 days a week, you're going to really have to be evaluative of the curriculum. It's really heavy on the content end as far as the development of the story and then the development of the vocabulary. There's a lot of pages in the workbook. So what I need you to do, don't feel constrained about that. You're not going to get to everything if you don't have the full time. And even if you do have the full time, it might be hard to get to everything. So what I want you to do is, if this is the first year your kids have seen this vocabulary, put the story aside and do it next week during your review and assessment week. This will be a great thing for you to go back to during that week 4. And when it says choose a story, choose this story. So this will be a good review and assessment week to see your kids retell it. And just focus in on the vocabulary, because if they don't have the vocabulary, that's what you want to focus on first. That's the #1 priority. Second thing is, if your children have seen this vocabulary, do some review, have some conversation about this. Don't feel like you have to get to all the workbook pages on it, and focus in on the story. Or, for instance, you could just take one day and go through multiple parts of the story instead of doing a little bit at a time, and then give yourselves bigger chunks to work on vocabulary later in the week. You have these freedoms. Take a look at your face page of the unit where it says student learning objectives. Really focus in on that. What are our objectives this week? That the kids build some conversational skills around the calendar time and the vocabulary on the house and the rooms. Identify and describe the furniture in the living room and engage conversations about the activity. Those are things that you want to focus on. Make sure that you integrate that in every way. Read and demonstrate comprehension by filling in missing text and creating illustrations for their own book in La Sala. Now this is if your kids really need to focus on the target vocabulary. If this is the second time around and they have a really good grasp on the vocabulary, focus in on the story. Okay, and maybe you can pull in some of those worksheets in week 4 when we're doing more of an assessment piece. Okay, so I just want to give you that freedom and liberty. Look at your objectives. Think critically about your class. You're the teacher. You know your class better than anyone else. And then deliver the curriculum appropriate to where your kids are at. First priority being vocabulary development. Second being the literacy component, where we're building the story. I'd rather have you focus in on something and do it well than hit a whole bunch of things really lightly and not get the kind of depth of language that we want. If they don't really experience the language with lots of repetition, like I talk about in Spanish 1, they don't have a chance to be able to mobilize it and access it later. We're not about hitting things really quickly and kind of skimming along like we're trying to, like you're tossing a rock that you want to skim along the surface, like skipping rocks. That's not what we're about. We're about taking that big, hunky, super heavy boulder and throwing it into the water, having it fall to the bottom, and seeing the ripple effect of that. That's what I want you to be about in your instruction. Okay? So let me get really practical. If you want, well, go ahead and take a look at Spanish 1 if you're going to do the vocabulary development piece. If you're going to build out the story, what I really want you to focus on is pronunciation when they're doing the reading. Do some popcorn reading with that. And then really build out the different components. Talk through the story enough. Read it a couple of times maybe. You read it. You have a couple of kids read it. You have a couple of kids while they're reading it. act it out, get dramatic, have fun with it, and then see if they can't do page 148 where they have to put the events of the story in order. The next day, maybe go ahead and read it again or talk through it and see if they can fill these out on their own. Always give yourself time to go back in and correct it. Kids need immediate feedback that they're either going down the right direction or they're not, and how do they correct it. These are learning moments. Always go back and check the work, give them feedback, make sure that they've got the right answers, because otherwise they go back into these workbooks later on or take them home and they're going, is that what the language that I was supposed to be studying, and they're studying the wrong thing. So we don't want that to happen. Okay, so the story is pretty much the same, and then the vocabulary development pieces are very similar to Spanish 1. There's just a whole lot more language that we want to be including. Okay, we really want them to start extending past just what's the color. We want to review some of the adjectives that we can bring in and talk about the place and space of the living room. So go ahead and really have them filling out. Look at all these great sentences. En la sala puedo relajar or puedo leer. Mi libro favorito es, and everybody can write their own favorite, es la historia de, and then who's the character, who's the person. So make sure maybe bring in your favorite book that you like to read, and you're going to fill it in the way you like to. A mí me gusta sentarme en la sofa para leer, or la silla cómoda. Okay? Because those are the adjectives that we're working on this week in Spanish 1. Cómodo y incómodo. So really have fun building out those sentences. This is a great worksheet that you want to get to, if not this week, when we get back from spring break in the review week. This is super important because it kind of brings it all together in the different like furniture and things of the house. All right? Those are my big, also in this week, you're going to do full sentence dictations and reading. You really want to have the kids separate the words. When I say, a mí me gusta, let me pull out a real example. When I'm using the words teléfono, teléfono, ¿cuántas sílabas tiene esta palabra? Teléfono. Really count them out. Why do we do that? Because it really helps the kids separate the sounds, be able to focus, and then know if they're even close by being able to go back. I remember it had 4 syllables. And then they have a chance at actually building out the complete word. So, watch how you're using the language to keep them in the language. Be reinforcing their successes so that you really esteem them as people. Always use the learning moment. If the kid's faltering, make that a learning moment and teach them, swoop them up, esteem them. And then for your more independent kids that are going for it, great, esteem them as well. And also make sure you come around from the back and correct what they've done so that they're continuing to be affirmed with what they have. And when they take this workbook home at the end of the year, there's lots of good stuff in it that they can really study and continue their language learning and reinforce what they learned. So have a great week. Thanks for all your hard work. We got 1 more week until we all go on spring break, and then we come back for review and assessment. All right, hasta luego.